Alright guys, Hayzink here, welcome back to the channel for another Street Fighter Duel video. Now I've got an idea in my head what I've probably put in the thumbnail for this video, so I really hope that people understand quotation marks. I'm not saying what is in the thumbnail, it's what I've seen other people saying, and that is basically Street Fighter Duel is becoming stale and boring, and I'm here today to basically assess if that is actually true or not and gauge you guys' opinions for why people might be feeling that way. Usually I would do an event review, but I can kind of do an event review while covering this topic at the exact same time because I feel like both of these things go hand in hand. Now, this was our most recent event, and to be honest, this event was probably the catalyst for when I see most of these comments starting to pop up and becoming a little bit more prevalent throughout the community. Okay, so why are we now seeing this? Well, let's take a look at the event, shall we? We had this, we had this, and we had this. We've had this before. We've had this with the Evil Ryu event. Okay, this was essentially a copy paste of the Evil Ryu event. Okay, now over and above that, we've had, I want to say, one other kind of event that was more of a recurring kind of structure, which was the Devil May Cry event. Obviously, the Dante event and the Virgil event, they were essentially the same thing. Only difference with those is you had the agency mission, you had this, but it was broken up into an explore map. But ultimately it was the same thing, it was just packaged differently. And you had this, but again, the only difference was instead of having this that you had to work on, you had the debuffs that you could put on your team and you had the workbench. Basically the same things packaged up in a different way. So people have started to obviously realise that when it comes to events and stuff, we are served up the same content quite a lot, okay? And in the time between events, we get a lot of stuff coming back. So we get this, we get street art, we get HWA, although that's not that common, to be honest. But these are like recycled content is how people see them, okay? Is that the cause of people saying the game is becoming stale and boring? Well, I'm going to argue that no, it's not, right? And allow me to explain. Most, if not all, gacha games do this. They repackage the same style of content in a different way repeatedly to their player base. Right? If you go and look at a game like Dislight, for example, Dislight's events are pretty much always the same. There's one or two variations, but those variations keep coming back around, and the way that you do events, tackle events, are virtually always the same. Okay, Disgaea RPG, when I used to play it, it was always story mode, raid, that was it. You done a story mode, you done a raid, you got some summons. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. It was always the same, okay? However, there is usually something that breaks the monotony of that in other games. And what that is the bosses, the stages, the things that you take on generally have some kind of weakness, okay? And what this encourages you to do as players is go into your box, build out different teams so that, okay, you may be doing the same content, however, the way that you tackle that content is different because you may have characters who are, and just using the example of some other games, characters who are of the human class get boosted damage, characters who are of the monster class get boosted crit damage. How that would apply here would be like flame faction, wind faction, that type of stuff, okay? Now, we could have that in this game, okay? We could have that in this game. However, there is a glaringly obvious problem with that, and that is they have criminally underpopulated the factional units within the game, leaning more into Inferno characters, Master characters, and Limited characters, okay? So people don't really have the diversity of units within their box for them to roll out this style of content. So instead, what we've now started to get is this free team format, okay? And ultimately, I feel like the free team format is probably the greatest undoing of any kind of positivity that people had towards new events coming out within the game. Again, allow me to explain. Because what you now find is if you are in a server that has the multiple team setup, okay? Whereas before you could find one solid team that had a niche, something that worked, something that you could experiment with, whether it was timing, whether it was abilities, whatever. You could find that team and you could exploit its advantages and gain really high scores against the boss. Now you can still do that. However, if someone has maybe 2 mediocre teams that they can put in to Team 2 and Team 3, the combined score of all 3 will probably smash the one team that you were able to figure out that could really boost and get maybe 600 million on the first round, first team. But then your Team 2 and your Team 3 barely can hit 100 million. Someone who can put out 3 teams that can consistently hit 300 million are going to outscore you, okay? So what people are now finding is, because these events are coming and they're the same thing over and over and over again, it's exposing the weaknesses within their boxes. It's exposing the fact that they do not have a lot of variety, and they are looking at the likes of the leaderboard and they're seeing that everyone is doing variations of the same thing. It's like, if we look here, my teams, if we look here, their teams, if you look here, their teams, if you look there, their teams, there's not a lot of variation going on, right? It is pretty much an event comes along, put out the same teams over and over and over again. And that is why people are starting to find that the game is becoming stale and boring. It's not actually because the content they're delivering isn't decent, because honestly, you're not really going to get much different elsewhere. All these games are the same. They basically recycle in the same thing all the time. It's just in those games you have the ability to switch it up when you're tackling it, when you're doing it. And in this game, we just can't do that. We can't. Even if you are someone who is a whale within this game, you're still ultimately probably going to roll out the same teams over and over and over again. Sure. And I mean, to be honest, like, this must suck to be on this server with me, because I was able to take top in each of these events, but that was just purely because I've got a more stacked out box than other people. So I'm able to field 3 strong teams, but not a lot of thought really goes into it. Ultimately, is that fun for anyone else playing? Probably not. But at the same time, what am I going to do? Not put out the 3 best teams that I can? You know? It would be better if we could have single bosses back, whether that be once every other event, maybe 2 teams, you know, mix it up, make it different. Don't now just constantly go to 3 teams, that's it, everything we now do is going to be 3 teams, because it's turning people off the game. It is that ultimately is why I think people are saying it's stale and boring, because I think it's like everything else in life. If someone doesn't feel like they are good at something, which in a game like this, I think good is a very relative term, but if people don't think they're good at something, they tend to say it sucks. That tends to be what happens, right? I've done it many a times. There's games like first-person shooters, I suck at them, and I tend to say first-person shooters suck. And it's not because they necessarily suck, it's because I suck. But that, when I speak outwardly, translates as me saying first-person shooters suck. Don't like them. They suck. But that's because I suck at them, right? Plain and simple. So when it comes to things like this, when you're suddenly having to take on events, and you're suddenly having to find units to build out teams that you just don't have. You don't have, and you see where previously you were easily able to rank top 10, maybe top 50, and you're now struggling to even get near top 50. You're like, this game sucks. This game sucks. I don't like it. Sucks. It's boring. Sucks. But it's because you're not progressing. It's because you're not getting the dopamine fix of, yes, I've done it. I've reached this score. I've done that score. And it's because the game is inhibiting you by introducing these free team systems. And the thing is, it's not even as if there's enough variability within the game with unit pools and stuff like that you could realistically have a lot of options when it comes to building out these teams, because most of the bosses in this type of thing, unless they've got a gimmick like Ken did where he was melting your backline unit, or Ryu did, even Akuma I suppose to a certain extent, all of these had the same kind of gimmick. Most of them don't have that, right? But generally you are going to use a top level DPS and you're going to get the best score more often than not, right? So you're going to more often than not have someone like your Akuma and your Vega team. You're going to have something like your Trendy Kami team with maybe Monster Hunter Kent on there, really boosting up your score. And then you're probably going to have a team with something like Fashion Blanca, probably with support from Flame Chun-Li, and maybe someone like Dalsim in the background. All of those units have something in common, which is they are going to rely on either a legendary or a master or inferno type character. And again, while I understand the whole concept of if someone purchases a unit, then of course you expect that unit to perform better, but with having free teams as your format, there isn't really any scope for someone to do what, say, Pika used to do, where he would be like, guys, here is a fully free-to-play team that can 100% compete with Wales. You might be able to do that to get maybe possibly top 50, whereas before you were able to do that to actually challenge to get to the top, right? Because those Wales might not have put the investment into the likes of Standard Chun-Li, Guile, Viper, because they've been too busy using their resources into the likes of Monster Hunter Ken, Evil Ryu, Akuma. So if someone comes up with a strategy, which happened before with me, when people found out about the Guile cheese strat, I didn't have enough stones to get my Guile up to Fighting Spirit 30, so I couldn't compete, I couldn't beat that strategy. I had to find a new strategy. That doesn't really exist much anymore because of this free team system. So is the game becoming stale and boring? No, because I feel like the game is delivering what it's always delivered from day one, and my expectation of that was never really different, because again, I've played enough of these games to know that they don't reinvent the wheel, they don't bring out something that's different at its core from what you've always had. I feel like what they've done is they've added a system that maybe they thought was going to freshen things up, but what it's done instead is it's exposed people to the lack of depth they have within their boxes, and the fact that realistically they're not going to get that depth without spending money. And when people feel like that's the only way that they can progress, that's when they start to say things like, this game sucks, this game's boring, and all the rest of it. So ultimately, could the developers freshen the game up? Absolutely. Absolutely they could. Will they? That remains to be seen. We've just got to wait and see. If you enjoy the game, continue playing the game. Just realise that it's not necessarily you. You're not necessarily the reason why you can't break top 50. To be honest, it's really the fault of the game developers, if we're being completely honest, because they are putting you in a position where, unless you're spending money to get these grade A units to build Team 2 and Team 3 to make them super solid and super viable, it's going to be a challenge and a struggle to even get up there unless you're in a severely underpopulated battle zone. So anyway guys, that's just my take on this. Overall, what did I think of this event? It was the Evil Ryu event with a different lick of paint. We'll get this a lot. I don't expect much variation in the events. We'll get some that use the explore method, we'll get some that use something along the lines of the agency method we got with Dante, and we'll get some that use this Void Tower method. if the next event is Oni, because Oni is essentially a Kuma, will he have the same format as this? I'd say there's a strong chance, but I feel like doing this and then immediately doing the exact same thing again with Oni would come off as a little bit lazy and boring, so hopefully they do something different. But if I do the whole grade thing that I usually do for this event, I think I gave Evil Ryu's event a B, maybe a B. I feel like I need to give this the same because it's the same event with a different lick of paint. That's all I can really say about it. Anyway guys, I've been Hayzink, thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, I'll catch you in the next video, thanks for your support, like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell because YouTube is cucking me something rotten, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.